what's up? I'm Jesse from Nifty. We're here with Corbin Billings, the director of Limerick Ranch. It's kind of Halloween time, so we thought we'd spotlight kind of a horror thriller film from Nifty 2010. So Corbin, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for interviewing me.
No problem. So go ahead and tell us what Limerick Ranch is about.
Well, Limerick Ranch is a story that sort of delves into the Navajo mythology of what's an equivalent to a werewolf in Native American lore, which is known as a skinwalker. And it's sort of these anamorphic beings that can shapeshift from coyotes into these more beast-like creatures that are known for going into ranches and farms and sort of mutilating cattle, and there's been a whole lot of unexplained occurrences. So the movie sort of delves into that when a freelance hunter answers a want ad and goes to a ranch, and horror ensues.
Nice, that's great. So how much of the film is based on any kind of reality or facts or stuff you researched versus just stuff you kind of made up?
Well, it's really interesting. When we originally went and started working on the project, it was more of sort of the mysticism and of this sort of it just hadn't really been delved into enough by modern filmmaking. And but it wasn't actually until I was at Nifty 2010 that I met a filmmaker. She was a young Navajo girl, and saw the film and found striking comparisons to stuff that she had experienced. Of course, it wasn't as Hollywood, but she could definitely relate to it. She said that her aunt was in fact a skinwalker, and really, really interesting stuff. And it was just another one of those crazy coincidences. But when we named the film Limerick, we actually didn't realize this at the time, or at least the writer didn't, that Limerick is the Mohawk Indian word for skinwalker. And just sort of he had spelled it incorrectly, but the word was still there. So it was sort of a interesting serendipity.
Wow, that's really interesting. So have you only made kind of horror thriller films, or have you done other kind of stuff like dramas, comedies? I mean,
yeah, you know what? I've tried my hand at a lot of drama and comedy. I just graduated from the University of Southern California, and while I was there, I got to try my hand at a bunch of different films. I did everything from there was a short that I did called Electricity. It was about a male plug falling in love with a female socket, and it was all sort of done with puppetry, and it was that was a great one. And then I also tried my hand at drama. And I did a movie called Collide that took place in the aftermath of a car crash, and a man awoke upside down and struggled free of his car and saved another girl from a car that was involved in the wreck, only to find out that he had been drunk driving and caused the whole thing. And so that was sort of my stab at drama. But since then, I've sort of found my niche in writing and directing horror thrillers.
So why don't you talk about some of the challenges you faced during production of your film? I mean, it was a really kind of massive looking production. You had a lot of elements. You had this great location, all these actors. You had special effects and things like that. You had like animals, things. How did all that go? I mean, it seems like it was a pretty big undertaking.
Yeah, it was the mother load. Actually, the first time that I read the script, I thought it was suicide, because the way that USC sort of structures it is that you have to compete with your scripts and pitching yourself as the director, and then they only choose 4 projects. And so I thought going in with this thing that this was going to require a budget way beyond what they were going to be able to provide. But luckily we were able to stretch our pennies and make it really work. But some of the challenges that we faced, for sure, finding our ranch location, that was the #1 hurdle. We actually had to drive an hour out to set every single day of shooting, whether it was in Santa Clarita or in Camarillo, which is where we did the corn fields and that whole end finale. And but even more than that, it was a real pleasure learning how to work with American Humane and having them come on set and be able to make sure that no animals were harmed during the making of the project, because we were staging cow mutilations and all kinds of different crazy things that we didn't want people to get concerned about after they saw the movie. So that was a really cool experience. But I'd have to say that the most interesting part of the experience was working with the actors and the casting. We had a Vic that was set up to be a part of the project, and then 2 weeks before shooting, he dropped out. And so now we're sitting here. We've done all of this pre-production to make sure that that the setting and everything is realistic, but we've lost our voices and our faces. So bringing a new actor into that mix so late in the game was a challenge. But then added on top of that, one of our other leads dropped out a week into shooting So then we're casting simultaneously while shooting, and then that became structuring which scenes is this character not in that we can shoot this first weekend so that we can lock him down and fill in all of those blanks later on. And that was really interesting. And but the paramount one was working with one of our actors who played the ranch foreman, Glenn Rayner, and he was formerly a Swedish pop star, and had actually gone platinum. And he had this very imposing demeanor. He had scars on his face, a scar across his throat, and one leading down his eye. I mean, he had the perfect look. But every single time that he opened his mouth, it was the most dulcet, sweet, Swedish pop star voice. So what we found ultimately was that we had to cut out all of his lines from the track because it sort of ruined the horror in the moment, the suspense. It would sort of break it into laughter. And so as soon as we took out all those lines, though, we noticed that his performance throughout the entire thing, just staring people down, was very menacing. And I've gotten so many, and he as well has received so many compliments after the project and it's a totally funny story how it came to be.
So one of the best parts about your film is kind of the sound design and the music. Do you kind of want to talk about that, kind of the work you put into that? It had so much detail and so much depth to it. Yeah,
well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, the soundtrack is awesome, and that all goes to the credit of Mike Kramer. He's a astounding composer, just graduated from USC, and what we really wanted to bring out in the project throughout the score was the importance of motifs and the different instrumentation that each character brought. So if you watch the movie, you'll notice that each character has their own little melody, and the great thing is when those characters collide, then the melodies blend. So, for instance, whenever we had Vic, who's the main character, the freelance hunter, he's always very, very much a loner. So what we did was we just isolated it with a single guitar string, so that every single time that Vic's motif plays, you just hear that twang. Rayner, who carries more of an Indian mysticism about him, he's always followed by these deep, bass drums. And then when those two mix, it's really interesting. And we also wanted to start it off going from country into a very Native American feel for the soundtrack. And so when the movie starts, it's this deep, stomp clap, very similar to something that Johnny Cash would have come up with. But then as the film progresses and you learn with the mystery that this is not just your average paranormal activity, that this is something that's Native American in its root, then everything becomes much more tribal, that we introduced flutes and bone rattles into the soundtrack, which sort of make that final encounter in the cornfield all the more creepy and ominous. So, and then as far as the sound design, we had the wonderful opportunity to mix it in 5.1. And so that's another cool thing is when you hear the skinwalkers, they're circling around you. They're going, full. It's a totally immersing experience for the audience. So many props to my sound designers, Victor Matthew and Cody Marion, on that one.
That's awesome. That's really interesting. So what are you working on now?
What am I working on now? Well, I've got since I've graduated college, I'm now pursuing a career in screenwriting. And so I've tried my hand at this point I've finished about 3 different projects, all of them still of the horror thriller genre. And I've also got a documentary that I'm currently in pre-production for, and I'm going to be directing later on, that tackles the challenge of American childhood obesity. And so we're taking a look into that, the reasoning behind it, and what kind of preventative measures we can do to combat this growing crisis. It's a big project. It's a big challenge that's really been unaddressed so far. So me and my co-producers, we're looking forward to tackling it. We're doing all of our research right now and digesting the information, and it should be something really special.
That's awesome. So do you want to talk real quickly about your experiences at Nifty 2010, kind of what the festival meant to you and kind of what you got out of it?
Oh yeah, well, what I could say first off is that I've never been treated so well as a young artist at a festival as I was at Nifty. The Q&A sessions afterwards are something that's really special for you as an artist to get in front of a group of people and explain to them all the funny stories and crazy happenings that occurred on set. But even apart from the red carpets and the interviews and all of that kind of stuff that make you feel special, it's such an interesting environment because you're surrounded by other youth filmmakers like you, who have the same passion, and they've all got their own different creative techniques that you can learn from. And it's such an incredible networking opportunity. I'm still friends with pretty much everybody that I've met at Nifty. I'm still in regular email, Facebook contact with them, and I'm constantly checking out their new stuff. They're taking a look at my new stuff, giving me feedback. It's wonderful.
That's so awesome to hear, Corbin. So thanks so much for being with us, and your film was great. I hope people can have a chance to check it out soon, and hopefully we'll see more from you in the future.
Absolutely. You can check out all of my stuff on my website, corbinbillings.com.